So we're getting ready. We're almost at the point where we can start sponsoring other people. Again, my sponsor, and I agree with it, but there's no hard and fast rule. My sponsor said as soon as you've done 2 amends in step 9, you raise your hand and start sponsoring other people. And I did it, and it seemed to work, because that helped me continue to grow as well. So, all right, we got step 7 here. I'm going to be reading even faster, if you can believe it. Top of the page, we're going to write humbly mentioned 35 times. So obviously, humility is the principle. Humbly mentioned 35 times. And then you can write DEF, D-E-F period, page 58. And we're going to slip back to page 58. So definition of humility is page 58. Humbly mentioned 35 times. Definition, page 58. So let's slap over to page 58. They've got a wonderful, in the 12 and 12, they've got a wonderful definition of humility. So we're going to go down to the second paragraph where it says another. Is everybody there? Mm-hmm. Okay, so where it says another, go 1, 2, 3, go down 3 lines, and then start underlining where it says to those. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. Right? Some of us come in here and we think we're the greatest people ever. Well, that isn't true. Others come in here and they think they're the worst people on earth, and that isn't true either. Right? So humility, it's just a recognition of what and who we really are, but it gets better because you follow it by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. Right? What do I think my higher power wants me to be? Right? Again, not to do, but what would he have me be? Would he have me be patient, tolerant, fair, decent, respectful? What would he have me be? So that's just a great definition. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Okay, right 4th column after shortcomings. That's the 4th column on all this paperwork we got. What is the exact nature of my wrongs, faults, mistakes, defects, or shortcomings? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, right? Since this step so specifically concerns itself with humility, underline humility, we should pause here to consider what humility is and what the practice of it can mean to us. So let's highlight this whole paragraph. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility, okay, I'll let you go ahead and highlight the whole paragraph, but next to greater humility, we're going to write a little line, we're going to write ego deflation. Ego deflation. And I wrote ego deflation, but I'm also thinking that for some people it might be ego inflation, if they have no self-worth at all, because that's not true either. The attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. So this is very important. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than may be required just for sobriety, they still haven't much chance of becoming truly happy. Without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose or, in adversity, be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. Remember, right, calamity and serenity, right? Serenity when we're going through calamity. Humility is a word and as an ideal has a very bad time of it in our world. Not only is the idea misunderstood, the word itself is intensely disliked. Many people haven't even a nodding acquaintance with humility as a way of life. Much of the everyday talk we hear and a great deal of what we read highlights man's pride in his own achievements. Okay, so next to that paragraph, just write reread. Reread often. We're going to want to reread that one often. With great intelligence, men of science. It reminds me when I'm running around as a commissioned salesman, right? If I get scooped by somebody, I am going to let every person that in my sphere of influence know that I know they scooped me. I know about it. I ain't going to let it go. Not only am I going to get even, but I'm going to take back double, you son of a bitch, because you can't do that to me, right? That's what a way to live your life, right? What a way to live your life. With great intelligence, men of science have been forcing nature to disclose her secrets. The immense resources now being harnessed promise such a quantity of material blessing that many have come to believe that a man-made millennium lies just ahead. Poverty will disappear and there will be such abundance that everybody can have all the security and personal satisfaction he desires. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. The theory seems to be that once everybody's primary instincts are satisfied, there won't be much left to quarrel about. The world will then turn happy and be free to concentrate on culture and character. Solely by their own intelligence and labor, men will have shaped their own destiny. After that, we're going to write, instincts are still out of control. Column 3. That's why that'll never be true. I don't care if it's any kind of socialist or communist utopia. People are still going to have their instincts, and they're still going to want to be above other people. They're still going to want to have more. So instincts are still out of control. At the top of page 71, by the way, let's write, humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. Humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. Right? I mean, if I know that I have enough, then I'll always have enough. If I won't need more and more and more. If I know I've got enough, I will always have enough. Certainly no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate material achievement. Underline the next 3 lines. Nor do we enter into debate with the many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. Next to that sentence, we're going to write the lie in quotation marks. The lie. If only I have enough money, if only I have a bigger house, a better car, if only I have that hot girlfriend, right? I'm going to be happy, right? But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. Underlined at the end of the paragraph, for thousands of years we have been demanding more than our share of security, prestige, and romance. And again, next to that, write 3rd column. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank to dream still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank for oblivion. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. After of what we thought we wanted, we're going to write addicted to more. We're addicted to more. In all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap has been our lack of humility. Underline the next 3 lines. We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. Right? Quite characteristically, we had gone all out in confusing the ends with the means. Instead of regarding the satisfaction of our material desires as the means by which we could live and function as human beings, we had taken these satisfactions to be the final end and aim of life. At the bottom of the page, let's write, who are you helping? Who are you helping? Are you praying / meditating? Develop new personalities. Who are you helping? Are you praying / meditating? Develop new personality. Who are you helping? Are you praying / meditating? Develop new personalities. True, most of us thought good character was desirable. But obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. With a proper display of honesty and morality, circle those 2 words, we'd stand a better chance of getting what we really wanted. But whenever we had to choose between character, above character, write challenge, and comfort, above comfort, write easier, softer, the character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. Okay, and then off to the left you can write the word warning again. And then highlight to the end of the paragraph. Seldom did we look at character building as something desirable in itself, something we would like to strive for, whether our instinctual needs were met or not. We never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. So put a little star next to that sentence, and after living, write must. Must. So at the top of page 72, Let's write develop spiritually or go back to defects. Develop spiritually or go back to defects. So again, this is something repeatedly we got to keep trying to do this thing, man. This lack of anchorage to any permanent values, this blindness to the true purpose of our lives produced another bad result. For just so long as we were convinced that we could live exclusively by our own individual strength and intelligence, for just that long was a working faith in a higher power impossible. And I'm sorry, you got to highlight that sentence, 4 lines. For just so long as we were convinced that we could live exclusively by our own individual strength and intelligence, for just that long was a working faith in a higher power impossible. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, man. I can quit drinking, I can do this, I can do that. Off to the left, let's write, as I become less, I get more in my life. As I become less, I get more in my life. As I become less, I get more in my life. This was true even when we believed that God existed. We could actually have earnest religious beliefs which remained barren because we were still trying to play God ourselves. Above God ourselves, write third step, and then highlight to the end of the paragraph. As long as we place self-reliance first, a genuine reliance upon a higher power was out of the question. That basic ingredient of all humility, a desire to seek and do God's will, was missing. So let's write action after that. So they're telling us that self-reliance as alcoholics is going to kill us, right? We got to have a God reliance, right? If this was a self-help program, we could buy a book and we wouldn't need to come to these stupid meetings and practice the steps, right? But it's not. It's a God-reliant program. For us, the process of gaining a new perspective was unbelievably painful. It was only by repeated humiliations that we were forced to learn something about humility. It was only at the end of a long road marked by successive defeats and humiliations, highlight the next 3 lines, and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency that we began to feel humility as something more than a condition of groveling despair. Bottom of the page, we're going to write, not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. It's another little definition. Not thinking less of me, right? But thinking of me less. Thinking less of me is low self-esteem. Not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less, right? Because I'm more concerned with helping out this other guy over there. I don't have to think about myself, what I'm not going to get, what I'm not going to have. Every newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous is told and soon realizes for himself that his humble admission of powerlessness over alcohol, highlight that his humble admission of powerless over alcohol is his first step toward liberation from its paralyzing grip. Top of page 73, write 4 words, let God fix you. Let God fix you. Get out of the way, man. We got to get out of the way. So it is that we first see humility as a necessity, but this is the barest beginning. Highlight to the end of the paragraph, to get completely away from our aversion to the idea of being humble, right? Because many of us don't like it. To gain a vision of humility as the avenue to true freedom of the human spirit, to be willing to work for humility as something to be desired for itself, takes most of us a long, long time. A whole lifetime geared towards self-centeredness cannot be set in reverse all at once. Rebellion dogs our every step at first, right? But we practice these things and we get better. When we have finally admitted without reservation that we are powerless over alcohol, we are apt to breathe a great sigh of relief. Well, thank God that's over. I'll never have to go through that again. Then we learn, often to our consternation, that this is only the first milestone on the new road we are walking. Still goaded by sheer necessity, we reluctantly come to grips with those serious character flaws. Next to that, write 4th column, that made problem drinkers of us in the first place. Flaws which must be dealt with to prevent a retreat into alcoholism once again. Underline that sentence. Flaws which must be dealt with to prevent a retreat into alcoholism once again. So we cannot, these character defects, if they let us drive us, and again, my purpose for living is to get more money, to get more sex, to get a bigger house. If that's all I'm living for, guess what, man? I'm going to be drinking in no time. right? So today, what am I thinking about? Hey, there's this new kid that, oh my gosh, he wants me to sponsor him. I'm going to help him through these steps, right? At work, these people need help. I'm gonna, I might miss a sale or two, but I'm gonna be there to help out these people. Because I feel better when I do that. We will want to be rid of some of these defects, but in some instances, this will appear to be an impossible job from which we recoil. And we cling with a passionate persistence to others which are just as disturbing to our equilibrium because we still enjoy them too much. How can we possibly summon the resolution and the willingness to get rid of such overwhelming compulsions and desires? At the bottom of the page, let's write, change comes hard to, put your name in there. Mine says, change comes hard to John. Right? And I got to tell you, we just had one of the big VPs from my company came out, and he said, look here, guys. He said, if you don't like change, this is not the company for you, because we got to keep on the cutting edge. We got to give our clients the best and the newest and the greatest. And we're going to have all these new things that you got to learn, and we're going to have all these new procedures. And if you don't like that, then get the hell out of here. So you better embrace the change, right? And I think when we're at this point in our sobriety, it's the same thing. We've got to embrace this change, or we are going to go backwards, and we are going to probably start drinking again. But we again are driven on by the inescapable conclusion which we draw from AA's experience that we surely must, circle must, try with a will or else fall by the wayside. At this stage of our progress, we are under heavy pressure and coercion to do the right thing. We are obliged to choose between the pains of trying and the certain penalties of failing to do so. These initial steps along the road are taken grudgingly, yet we do take them. We may still have no very high opinion of humility as a desirable personal virtue, but we do recognize it as a necessary, circle the word necessary, aid to our survival. Okay? But when we have taken a square look at some of these defects, write 4 next to that, have discussed them with another, write 5 above that, and have become willing to have them removed, write 6 above that. So we got steps 4, 5, and 6 right there. Our thinking about humility commences to have a wider meaning. By this time, in all probability, we have gained some measure of release from our more devastating handicaps. Underline, we enjoy moments in which there is something like real peace of mind. You'll get it, man. You'd be saying, "Oh my God, what?" We have moments that are just wonderful. We're not anxious. We're not thinking about the past. We're not worried about the future. We are enjoying the moment, right? Those are wonderful. I know people that actually can live that way. I'm certainly not there, but it's something that we strive towards. To those of us who have hitherto known only excitement, depression, or anxiety, in other words, to all of us, right? That's how we lived, excitement, depression, anxiety. This newfound peace, underline, this newfound peace is a priceless gift. Just those 5, 6 words. Something new indeed has been added. And then highlight to the end of the paragraph. Where humility had formerly stood for a forced feeding on humble pie, it now begins to mean the nourishing ingredient which can give us serenity. I want some serenity. I'm not going to sober up and have to live with that anxiety and that resentment and that fear, right? I want a little bit of serenity in there. This improved perception of humility starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of painful ego puncturing. Highlight the next sentence. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. Running from, you know what, man? The spiritual warrior, the way for the spiritual warrior is through the fire. You know what, though? When we start to walk through the fire, we see that fire isn't what we thought it was. It's not going to burn us, right? It doesn't even exist. It exists in our mind. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Highlight to the end of the page. Escape via the bottle was always our solution. Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it certainly didn't appeal to us. So we're going to write something at the bottom. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. And my goodness, You can apply that to your work life. You can apply that to your home life. You can apply that to your alcoholism. You can apply it to the working of the steps. You can apply it to everything. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. How many times you're at work and you want to go over with those disgruntled people in the corner and go, God damn it, can you believe what those sons of bitches in the office are? And you know, man, we're gonna try to make the best of things. We're gonna live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Top of page 75, let's write, it's not odd, it's God. A lot of us are going to start to see these amazing coincidences that start to happen when we sober up, right? It's not odd, it's God. Then in AA, we looked and listened. Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of weakness. In every case, underline, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. Right? Next to that, we're going to write gift of desperation. That's what they call the gift of desperation. And you know what? When some of us, we're staying sober, we're not drinking, but our character defects cause us so much pain that we have got to really work steps 6 and 7 like you never believed. That's going to be the admission into a new life. Right? I mean, pain is the touchstone to spiritual progress, somebody said somewhere. But this admission price had purchased more than we expected. It brought a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be a healer of pain. We began to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. Underline the next 3 lines. During this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was the change in our attitude toward God. Next to that sentence, write spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening. And this was true whether we had been believers or unbelievers. We began to get over the idea that the higher power was a sort of Bush League pinch hitter. Okay, next to that, write foxhole prayer. To be called upon only in an emergency. God, if you get me out of this one, I promise I'll never do it again. I promise. The notion that we would still live our own lives, God helping a little now and then, began to evaporate. Many of us who had thought ourselves religious awoke to the limitations of this attitude. Refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of His help. But now the words, underline, of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the works, began to carry bright promise and meaning. Just that little sentence there. We saw we didn't always need to be bludgeoned and beaten into humility. Underline the next 5 lines. It could come quite as much from our voluntary reaching for it as it could from an unremitting suffering. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility as something we really wanted rather than as something we must have. You know, again, if I think I've got enough, I will have enough. If I think that I don't have enough of anything, I'm going to constantly have that anxiety and depression. Bottom of the page, let's write, God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. God, higher power, He, she, it, whatever you want to call it. God reveals more to me the more I seek Him. It marked the time when we could commence to see the full implication of Step 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Okay, as we approach the actual taking of Step 7, it might be well if we AAs inquire once more just what our deeper objectives are. Okay, put a 1 by each and highlight. So here's what our deeper objectives are. 1, each of us would like to live at peace with himself and his fellows. That's 1. And then put a 2 in front of we and highlight that sentence as well. We would like to be assured that the grace of God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. So we're going to need God's help with these defects of character. Self cannot overcome self. But that does not exclude us from all responsibility. We have got to practice the opposite of what our character defects are. We've got to do that with God's help. We have seen that character defects based upon short-sighted or unworthy desires are the obstacles that block our path toward these objectives. We now clearly see that we have been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. Let's highlight the next paragraph. The chief activator of our defects, this is very important, so we're going to put a star by it. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear, put a 1 in front of we, that we would lose something we already possessed. or would, put a 2 in front of fail, would fail to get something we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. I mean, just a simple example, right? I get a big commission order, right? Somebody calls it in. The commission on it is $2,000, right? I've had this order for a couple of weeks, and I know it's not mine, right? But all of a sudden I think, oh my God, somebody's going to they're going to know that the deal is theirs. They're going to call me and I'm going to lose this. And I start to freak out that I might lose something that wasn't mine to begin with, right? And I'm just fear that I'm going to lose it. And I mean, it's a horrible way to live, right? And that's, I'm going to lose something I've got, or I'm not going to get something that I think I deserve, man. No peace unless we can reduce these daggone demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone. We got the next 5 lines highlighted. The 7th step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves towards others and towards God. This is where the change takes place. The whole emphasis on step 7 is on humility. You can stop highlighting there. It is really saying to us that we now ought to be willing to try humility in seeking the removal of other shortcomings, just as we did when we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result, underline, the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. Okay, so that whole last 5 sentences, you can write 7-step promises. So we're getting some 7-step promises in the 12 and 12, right? So, if our obsession to drink can be banished, right, then through this same doggone process, any other problems that we have are going to be fixed. I mean, if you got somebody that's been sober, and this happens all the time, right? What happens is people stop drinking. They really don't continually work on 6 and 7, and all of a sudden they have thinking sprees. They have fear sprees. They have spending sprees. They have sex sprees. They have eating sprees. They have all these galldarn sprees. Somebody's 7 years sober and they're $50,000 in credit card debt. They're getting a divorce. I mean, they are not, this stuff is, we can still make ourselves miserable, but this, step 6 and 7 is the key to getting us some doggone serenity and some peace of mind in the future. I'm going to read just a couple of notes here real quick, and the defects of character, right? Each character defect, it has the bad, but there's also a goodie, right? With every character defect. So like when I have a resentment, you know how when you, God dang that son of a bitch, you know how you just feel that awful feeling in the pit of your stomach when you have a resentment and you just don't feel good, you're nervous and your heart hurts and everything? That's an awful feeling, right? But are we willing to give that up? Then we also have to give up the pleasure of judgment. Man, I love judging other people. Look at that guy over there, right? So we give up the resentment. We got to give up the judgment, right? Bill's story, it talked about getting rid of his defects of character, root and branch, right? The root is the bad part. The root is giving it up, and the branch is poking us in the eye. We got to get rid of both of them. If I'm dishonest and I get somebody else's sale, right? The good part is I get a little extra money, but what's the horrible part is that I'm living fear that I might be found out, right? If I'm inconsiderate of other people, I might get more for myself, but I can't look myself in the mirror because I think I'm a lousy person. If I'm afraid, right, that allows me not to do things that I should do or to keep doing things that I know I shouldn't do, right? But then if I'm afraid, I don't get the benefits of trying new stuff or getting rid of bad habits. So there's two parts to all of these things. Let's see here. So these basic instincts, the basic instincts of life. Actually, I'm going to go right into our 4th column on these sheets. The selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, fearful, and inconsiderate. From these stem all our defects of character. So, in step 5, we know the nature of our wrongs. In step 6, we become willing to let the character defects go. And in 7, we ask God to remove our shortcomings. So all these different terms, Bill Wilson, the guy who wrote it, was asked, what's the difference between all these things? He said there is no difference. So the guy that wrote it, so if anybody says that they all mean different things, the guy who wrote it said they don't. In 1998, I went through treatment. I didn't have any insurance, but the guy knew I was dying. He said, I'm going to let you sneak into treatment. So I went through a 30-day program. A day program. I got out. I got a rule, what do they call it? Rule 25. I went to Progress Valley, toughest halfway house in the country, for 3 months. I got out of that. I went to 6 months Catholic Charity Sober Living. Then I moved in with a sober guy, right? All this time, I did not work the steps. I stopped drinking and doing drugs, but I did not change. So I'm running around putting myself first. I'm being selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, dishonest, fearful, inconsiderate, impatient, intolerant, resentful, suspicious, egotistical, right? Just to name a few. And I made it to 1 year, and I got a shiny 1-year medallion. I didn't have any alcohol or drugs, but I got to tell you, that medallion didn't mean one goddamn thing, right? Because I was sort of in this fellowship, but I was not in recovery, and I did not feel good. Of course, what did I do? I relapsed. I gambled first, and then I relapsed. During that time, I could say, hey, my name is John. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm recovering. What that meant to me is that meant that I'm not quite there yet, so I still get to cheat on my taxes. I still get to lie to people at work, particularly if I'm in a tight spot. If I'm in a tight spot at work, because I'm only recovering, I can still lie to these people, right? I get to stand in judgment of others. I don't have to really do what I say, right? It's okay if I lose my temper and take it out on other people because I'm only recovering, right? So when I thought that way, I was not responsible yet, and I could still blame others. I was still a victim. I blame my boss, the cops, my clients, the government. I blame mommy and daddy, right? When I have gone through the work, I've completed 4, 5, 6, 7, I am now responsible. I'm responsible for how I act. I'm responsible for what I do, what I say, and I can no longer blame others, right? And I no longer get to wallow in self-pity and say, it's not me, it's them. They did it, right? So step 4, we search out the flaws which caused our failure. 5, we become honest with ourselves, with God, and with another. In 6, we start to become willing to have God remove these defects of character. In 7, the change takes place. Step 6 and 7, that is the story of my life over these last 3 years, continually trying to build my character. My old toolbox, the one I lived with for 40-some years, was to lie, cheat, steal, con, manipulate, and use alcohol and drugs and run away from things, right? So, when we're looking at these things, if I get rid of my selfishness, how am I going to get what I want, right? I'm a salesman. If I get rid of my dishonesty, how can I make a living, right? If I get rid of my fear, how can I face life? I might have to stop doing things that I know I should stop, and I might have to start doing things that are scary, but I know I should do them. If I consider others above myself, who the hell is going to take care of John, right? So God will do for me what I cannot do for myself, but God will not do for me what I can do for myself. So selfishness, I've got to practice selflessness. I've got to practice it, and God, you got to help me practice selflessness, right? So I've got to give of my time and money. I have to purposely do that. Dishonesty, I've got to try to practice honesty in every situation. Even if I'm in a tight spot at work, man. A lie is going to get me out of this one. I can blame somebody else. No, man, I did it. I got to face up to it. Fear, I've got to start practicing courage and do things I'm afraid to do. Inconsiderate, I've got to start to consider others before myself, right? Now, I would think, well, if I do this, I'm not going to have any personality. I'm not going to be John anymore, right? And that's not true, because if I can get rid of my flaws and my defects, and again, I got to have God's help, right? God is going to let the opposite flow in, right? So my mental habits must be broken by working against myself with God's help. I mean, I look at it as a partnership with God. I'm constantly praying to be more honest, to be more selfless, right? To be less selfish, right? Because self cannot overcome self. If it was, we could buy a self-help book and we wouldn't need to come to these meetings. So I've got to try to be more honest. I've got to try to be more giving. I've got to try to be more considerate. I pray for God's help in doing this, right? If I cast aside my old ideas and let the new ones take over. 6 and 7 are tools of acceptance and change. 2 little steps, but perhaps the 2 biggest steps, right? Just like Judas, if you know your Bible, man, I wanted to kill myself because I could not stand or accept what I had become, what I had done, and how I was living, right? So I had to be reborn. Now, when I'm trying to practice 6 and 7, I pray for specific things, right? God, please help me to be happy for these other salespeople when they get the big orders, right? Help me. I don't want to be envious or jealous because I don't like that feeling, right? God, please help me to give of my time and my knowledge to other people, even if it costs me a little bit of money, right? That's my greed. I don't need every single deal, right? God, please help me to treat the new warehouse people with respect, dignity, and tolerance, even when they make bad mistakes that cause me a lot of grief, right? Because I cannot continue to be dishonest and expect God to remove my dishonesty. I cannot continue to be selfish and expect God to remove my selfishness. I cannot continue to be inconsiderate of other people and expect God to make me a considerate person. So I've got to practice the opposite of what my nature has been my whole life. I become different by doing different things, by acting honest, by being selfless, by practicing giving, by becoming loving, by trying to be humble, right? So the old John has to die, the new John has to be reborn. 4 and 5 shows us what we need to change. 6 and 7, the change takes place. And that's a lifetime job, man. It's not going to happen overnight. So I got to work against myself with God's help, right? When I first started practicing these things, I would automatically, I would scoop somebody else's deal, right? I'm driving home. All of a sudden I would think, I'd like, oh my God, I'd have to turn around, wheel back to the shop, and I'd say, hey, this is your order, change it, and after you do that 10 times in a row, you say, you know what, it's just easier to give them the sale right off the bat. Right? So, but yeah, you have to keep doing it, though. You got to make yourself do it, because I am now responsible for what I do, what I am, what I say, and how I act. I can no longer blame others. My victimhood is gone, right? There is no room in AA for victimization. What happened to us in the past does not have to dictate what we do today. Steps 4 through 7 are the greatest tools of change one can possibly have. So again, I'm no longer what I used to be. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm completely unselfish. I'm not always honest, but most of the time, I'm an unselfish, honest human being with courage who tries to consider others first, right? We people in AA here, we are the luckiest people on earth. We get to live 2 lives in one lifetime. Most people, most non-alcoholics, they're still sick, man. They are still sick, and they go to the grave and they die not knowing what's wrong with them. I see regular folks, they still have the resentment, they still have the envy, the jealousy, all that stuff. We get to find out what's wrong with us in 4 and 5, and we get to change it in 6 and 7. Regular folk they don't get to do that, man. We get to do it because our alcoholism drives us in here. That's why I used to hate it when they said I'm a grateful I'm a grateful alcoholic. I'm not grateful, I'm almost homeless. So the step originally read, humbly on our knees, asked him to remove our shortcomings. And, quite frankly, when you do 4 and 5, we're doing 6 and 7. Take your hour, and then we're going to do 6 and 7. And then guess what? We got our list made. So you know what? When you're done with 5, you're pretty much at 9. But we don't want to tell them that, right? We don't want to scare anybody. So the 7-step prayer, it says, "My Creator, I am now ready that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my sobriety, my happiness, my success, my serenity, my getting back with my girlfriend, my safety, my 401k," right? If I would have wrote it, it would have read like that. But I didn't write it. Bill wrote it, and Bill was self-centered. He was selfish to the extreme, just like me. But he wrote, "which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows," right? Simply amazing that he wrote that. "Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding." I'm glad I didn't write that prayer. When you're unselfish, guess what? People like you better. When you're honest, right, you feel better about yourself, your self-esteem. When you are courageous, you do things that make you feel better, esteemable acts. I discovered that there's real pleasure in considering others first. Before I did this stuff, I never knew that. How could I have? I'd never lived that way. So, everybody runs around in AA talking about acceptance. I accept this, I accept that, blah, blah, blah. Acceptance is a key. Acceptance is the key. But you know what? Acceptance is a process, and the process is steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And it says somewhere our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to the people about us, right? Not to get material things. God did not remove my obsession to drink, melt the ice around my heart, right? And teach me how to be usefully and happily whole so that I could stay home and watch television. He didn't do that, right? Horace Mann wrote, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for mankind." Right? So for me, that victory is passing my experience, strength, and hope along to another sick and dying alcoholic and trying to practice these steps not only here in these rooms, but also at home and at work. And at home and at work, it's the harder part, man. People see me doing stuff, and I mean, they remember what I used to be like, and it still just blows their mind whenever I do stuff. So 4 simple things that will change your life. Do what you say you're going to do. That's something we alcoholics, we never did that. So do what you say you're going to do. Be where you said you're going to be when you said you're going to be there, right? We never did that. Don't take out your hostilities on those who cannot respond, right? So you're having your really bad day, you take it out on a waiter, a clerk, your children, maybe your parents, your employees, a waitress. We don't do that, right? And when you're having a really bad day and you're going crazy, we keep our mouth shut. Right, just keep your mouth shut so we don't lash out at friends, family members, and colleagues and destroy a relationship. So we learn how to keep our doggone mouth shut so we don't damage relationships and we don't hurt feelings. So humility is the principle behind step 7. If I practice this, I get to live in harmony with God. I get to live in harmony with myself. And I get to live in harmony with others and the world about me. So, what a priceless gift. And we're actually going to end. We're going to switch now. We are. I guess I can read this. What can we contribute to life? Less interested in our plans and our designs. We avoid retaliation and argument. We empty our head of anger, fear, guilt, shame. We let God replace these with love, courage, faith, peace, forgiveness, and goodwill. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of service to others. Let go of criticism and gossip. Ask God to show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. So I'm gonna read the paragraph on the 6th step, and we're gonna end from now on with the 7-step prayer, because that's where we are. So page 76 in the big book. Top of the page, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. Okay, that whole thing should be highlighted. And then, we're gonna end again with just this prayer right here now. So on the knees, if you're able. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. All right, so, and guys, you can look at that sheet for yourself. We try to move from one side a little bit more to the other side as we practice.